Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar presentation. We'll give just a few minutes for the folks to get into the webinar before we begin. I will let you know the topic is From Challenge to Opportunity, How to Effectively Navigate the Next Steps in Your Career, presented by the FEI Dallas chapter. Take care of a few housekeeping notes while we're waiting for everyone to join the call. Today's webinar presentation is worth 1.5 CPE credits. To be eligible for that, you do need to answer 5 of the 6 polling questions during the webinar and have a total viewing time of 75 minutes. Participants will receive a CPE notification email when the credits are available, and that typically takes between 7 and 10 business days. Although during the summer hours, I think there might be a little bit of a delay. If you do have difficulty with the polling questions, please let me know in the chat box, and I'll make sure that you get credit. And in accordance with the standards of the National Registry of CPE Sponsors, CPE credit will be granted based on a 50-minute hour. It's now my pleasure to welcome Bob Walker. Bob is a Vice President and Financial Advisor for Merrill Lynch, but Bob is also the Chair of the Career Management Group at FEI Dallas chapter. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much. Welcome to everybody who's joined in. I'm going to tell you that we've got a lot of great things to announce, but I'm going to wait until the end of Crystal's presentation to be able to go over all of that. So I encourage you all to stay online after Crystal has completed, because there's a lot of cool stuff we need to discuss. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight or today, Crystal Yates, who is a senior certified HR professional. She's got a background in both human resources and small business operations. And she's actually been working for job seekers since 2010, assisting in all facets of job hunting, including resume writing, networking, interview prep. And actually in September 2018, Crystal published her first book, The Insider's Guide to Your Dream Career. Crystal holds both an SHRM and SCP and SPHR certifications, is a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, and an active Dallas HR member and volunteer. With that, I give you Crystal Yates.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Bob and Nancy. Thank you. I am going to jump right in. Let me see if I can get my screen shared here. Before I start, I am going to remind everybody that, I'm going to let everybody know this is an interactive conversation. Different audiences are going to have different questions. So I want you to jump in and I want you to let me tell you what you want to hear, not just talk about what I think you want to hear. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Bob's going to keep an eye on it for me, and we'll answer your questions as we go. So today we're talking about how to effectively navigate the next steps in your career. For a lot of people, what that means is moving to a new position, but it doesn't always have to. This is something that everybody should always be thinking about. Are you ready to take on more responsibility in your existing role? Are you ready to get a promotion? Is it time to leave your next position? All of these things are career changes, and we're going to talk about all of them. So before we jump in, we're going to do a quick poll. I want to know who is currently seeking a new position. So the poll's up. Are you looking for an internal promotion, maybe a lateral move or a change inside your existing position? Or are you looking for an external promotion or change? Or is this something you might be thinking of in the next 12 months? Or are you just on here because you need some CE credits and you just thought maybe it might be interesting? So you've got just a minute to do that poll. And we'll see where we all land on that. All right. Looks like we've got the vast majority of people on here. And by the way, guys, this is all anonymous. So if you're on here with other people that you don't want to share specific information with, you're safe. So it looks like most of our people here are actually looking to make an external lateral move. I'm hoping by the time we are done talking about this, maybe we'll see a few more who are looking for a external move up. A lot of people think that that's not doable, but I promise you it is. And that's the best time to take a step up. Okay, so the topics that we're going to hit on today, we're going to start by talking about the top challenges that we encounter as professionals. And I think we've got a fairly vast audience, but I'm going to tell you these things tend to be the same across the board. So we'll talk about what they are and how to overcome them. We're going to talk about where to start, how to start that search or that move into that new position. How do you create growth in your existing position or in your existing organization? Sometimes you like where you're at, but you know you need more. How to know when it's time to move, when you know that your position, your organization is no longer doing it for you. And finally, we're going to talk about how to effectively transition into that new position or that new organization. So let's start with the obstacles. Lots of research has been done on this, and the 5 obstacles, as they have been identified, are lack of focus. This is really, as far as I'm concerned, all encompassing. I don't know what to do. I haven't put any attention to it. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go home. I'm just kind of skating through my professional life. And this isn't just people that don't care about their professional life. A lot of us do that even when we're very driven. No focus, no idea what next looks like. Trying to please everybody. This is a really interesting one. And this can affect you both personally and professionally. Well, my boss really wants me focused in this area, even though my interest is over here. Or my spouse doesn't want me traveling, so I can't take this job. Or I have kids. Or now, don't mistake this for what you want. But this is when you're so busy trying to make sure everybody else is happy that you're not focusing on what's right for you. I always like to say that those who matter won't mind you focusing on what pleases you, and those who mind won't matter. Fear. This is a big one. Oh man, I've been at this company for so long, I don't dare go somewhere else. Anybody heard that one or said that one to themselves? Or I can't possibly move up. I'm missing a couple of skills to move up, which leads me into the next one, the pursuit of perfection. I can't move up until I have the skills that I'm looking for, but I can't get the skills until I move up. Anybody ever been caught up in that conundrum? Well, you don't have to be. And then the final obstacle is blame. And I see a lot of this in what I do. And that is, it's somebody else's fault. You know, my bosses hold me back. My boss is a jerk. I've worked with lots of jerks. I know they're out there, but it's not your boss's fault. So we have to learn to take responsibility for ourselves and do what we can to forward our career. So let's ask everybody what's holding you back. What do you think your number one obstacle to your next position is? Nancy, can you pull up that poll? So the options here are a little bit different. I went with the study details on that slide, but on this poll, I focused a little bit more on the things that I tend to see. So are you unsure what your next step is? Are you getting pushback from others? Are you scared of the change or what you don't know? Do you think age is holding you back? Is it your skill set? Or do you think someone else is holding you back? Or do none of those apply and maybe it's something else? So think about what those are. And I'd love to see what everybody says. Age. Okay, I'm not the least bit surprised. I'd love whoever selected other, I'd love to know what those others are in the chat box. And Bob, as you see those, I would love it if you'd let me know what those are. We're going to talk about age here in a second because I get that a lot. The funny thing is, I get that from both younger and older professionals. So anybody want to share what that other is? No? Oops, I think I jumped too far ahead. Here we go. All right. So, all right. So let's see what we've got on here as far as generations. What do we have here? And we've got another poll here. These are the years. Everybody says a little bit different. Okay. So if you're slightly outside of what my study came up with, I want you to tell me what generation you consider yourself, not necessarily what generation is showing up in here. For example, I'm Gen X. I've got a much younger sister who's actually a millennial, but if you ask her, she'll tell you she's a Gen X. So whatever you think that you are, I want you to jump in here and tell me. I've got a pretty good guess, just based on my experience with professional organizations, what I think this is going to look like. So I'm very, very curious to see where everybody lands. It looks like we've got a couple of comments here. I'm going to pull them up. No, okay. Okay, I'm going to close out of there. Okay, so we have mostly boomers and Gen X, and that's exactly what I expected to see. So guys, you guys are the demographic that I work with every day to help find new positions. And I assure you that for the most part, age is not your problem. Now, what's in our heads does tend to be. Now, I'm not naive. Don't get me wrong. If you go apply at one place and you think that age was your problem, it probably was. If you go apply at 5 places and you think age is your problem, then you're doing something wrong. And I know that's really, really hard to digest, and it's really, really hard to accept. But I want to give you guys some food for thought. I want you to take a step back, and I want you to think, if people are discriminating against you because of your age or your skin color or your ethnicity or anything like that, there is nothing you can do about it. So you continue to present yourself in the best possible light. You continue to do everything that you can to move forward, and you do it. You forget about those things. You pretend like they don't exist. And the people that do that are far more successful because they're walking into it with confidence instead of with a big black cloud over their head going, I'm being discriminated against. I'm going to tell you, especially in the Gen X and the boomer generation, what usually our problem is when we're trying to move outside of our current organization, it's not our age, it's our approach. We're still trying to job hunt like we did 20 years ago, and it's not working for us. So consider that. Bob, do we have any feedback that I need to look at? I see a whole bunch of things coming in on the chat. Are they?
I see nothing on the chat at all.
Okay. All right. All right. So don't hold yourself back with self-doubt. Assume that everybody wants you, everybody loves you. I'm going to tell you that we're seeing more and more employers focused on older workers because the reason they didn't want older workers before has gone away. There were 2 primary reasons employers would not hire older workers. One was the cost of benefits. The cost of benefits, the older you got, the higher it got. So if I could hire a 20-year-old instead of a 40-year-old, I was saving money on benefits. That's number 1. Number 2 was longevity. I need somebody who's going to be here for the next 30 years. Well, that's no longer a thing either. Health insurance changed drastically back in 2010 with the ACA. So that's self-corrected. Now we no longer are concerned about keeping employees for extended period of time. As a matter of fact, our boomers and our Xers tend to stay a whole lot longer than our millennials. Now, I'm not going to get into an argument about what's right or wrong. We're in a changing workforce, and I think we're all starting to recognize the value of moving around a little bit. And we definitely know that employers are no longer set up in a manner to keep you long-term. But consider those things. Now, the third reason, the one that could be legitimate, is skills. There is an assumption among some employers that older workers are lacking the more modern skills. Now, all you need to do to overcome that is present yourself in a way that shows that you've got those skills, which means doing things like this, taking continuing education, continuing to learn, and staying at the forefront of your industry. So, okay, when you're ready to move, overcome those, get past those problems, convince yourself you can do it. The next step is to identify your path. Now, this sounds very, very obvious. It is very, very obvious, and yet it's the number one step that people skip. Okay, we go to Job Hunt, we put together a resume, which is a list of all of our past accomplishments and a job history. And we go, here you go, here's what I can do. Where can you fit me in? And we take the scattershot approach to trying to apply to anything and everything. Well, I could do that if I had to. Well, I think I've got those skills. Well, I could do that. We never take the time to identify what that next step looks like. So I'm going to challenge everybody here, whether you're looking to move into a new position in the same organization, whether you're looking to move to a new organization, whether you're looking to move to a completely different field, if you want a promotion, whatever you're looking for, take some time and identify that. I have an exercise I use with my clients. I call it the dream job wish list. And it's exactly what it sounds like. I want you to go somewhere quiet, get your piece of paper, Xers and boomers, get your legal pad, millennials, get your phone out and start typing, or your computer. See, I'm stereotyping, I know. But whatever works for you to process. I'm a really big fan of handwriting because I think it helps you to process, but do what works for you. And sit down and put all reason aside. Don't think about money. Don't think about location or availability of the position. Just think, or even if some of these things go together, just take a step back and go, if I could create the perfect job for me, what would it look like? What am I good at? What do I like to do? What am I bad at? What don't I like to do? Let's make sure I'm not doing those things. What kind of culture am I looking for? How much am I willing to travel, or how much do I want to travel? How far am I willing to drive to work every day? And that's become a really interesting conversation over the last 2 years, as we all know. A lot of us are now in positions where we don't actually have to go in the office. So have we decided to draw that line in the sand? I'm only going to work from home. That's okay. Have you decided to draw the opposite line in the sand? My company's gone 100% virtual, and darn it, I want to go back in the office. So I'm looking for a company that's going to let me do a little bit of both. Whatever is right for you. There are no right answers, but there are also no wrong answers. Everybody on here, even with the similar backgrounds that you all have, you're all going to have different answers to this. So really just sit down, focus in. Now, I'll always be the first one to say, I don't think there is any such thing as the perfect job. I own a business. I love what I do. I give back. Every day brings me joy. I don't have a perfect job. There are days. So, but the more you focus on what perfect is to you, the more you go looking for that, the closer to perfect you're going to get. So don't discount it out of hand. Sit down and really, really dig in, get into the details of it, whatever's the most important to you. Some people, I don't really care what I do so much. I know I need to be people facing, but I have to be in this kind of a culture, or I have to be in that kind of a culture, or, you know, right now in this stage of my life, benefits are one of the most important things to me. Again, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It doesn't matter what that looks like, as long as you focus on what matters to you. Okay, so I am going to challenge everybody in here to go and do this sometime over the next week. And this is a living document. It's one that you're going to keep with you. You're going to spend 30 to 45 minutes putting it together. But once you're done, it's something you should continue to carry with you. And what it looks exactly like today is not going to be exactly what it looks like tomorrow. It's not going to be exactly what it looks like in a year. And even if you are actively job searching today, it's probably going to change over the next few weeks as you dig deeper into your job search. That's okay. But now you have a starting point. And when you have all these things listed out, when you get to the interview stage, now you've got something to balance. And again, this sounds so obvious, but it's something that I see missed so often. Okay, so you're going to put that together. You're going to consider what you're looking for. And now it's time to start. So you've figured out what your destination is. Now you've got to start planning your trip. Okay, now you're going to pull out the roadmap and start figuring out how you're going to go. So first, identify opportunities. Okay, if you're currently working, what can you do in your existing position to prep you for the next one? If you're looking to move up, and I know most of you said you weren't, and if you're truly not interested in it, that's okay. But if you're not thinking about moving up out of fear, then I want you to consider, what can you do to move up? Is there training available to you? Are there new challenges available or projects in your existing position? Can you take on new responsibilities? Don't wait to be handed opportunity. You've got to actively go out and look. And when all else fails, especially in the finance industry, volunteer. There are nonprofits abound in DFW. And we all need, and I say we because I volunteer on a couple of different boards, every single one of them needs some sort of financial help. So I guarantee you, you put a little effort into looking, you can find somebody that will let you exercise those skills that you're trying to gain. There's always a way. If you can't find it inside your organization, you can go get training externally. One of my favorite training sources is LinkedIn Learning. And if you have a premium version of LinkedIn, it doesn't cost you a thing. Now, it's not going to get you your CPA, right? It's not going to get you your continuing education or additional licensing. But if you just need to tighten up some skills so you can comfortably go to that next step, you're all in. So, and there's tons of other online sites. And then, of course, there are places like FEI that are going to provide you training every month. So make sure you're taking advantage of what is available to you. Communicate. This is another one that I see people bypass the opportunity for quite frequently. When I ask people, does your manager or those people that you work with know what your goals are? The answer is usually no. So whether you need more responsibility, whether you're unhappy, whether you're very happy but just ready to start moving up the ladder, you have to communicate. And again, don't wait for somebody to come to you with that conversation. Is it your leader's responsibility to come to you? Yes. Can you depend on them to do it? You absolutely can't. So if you haven't had a good conversation with your manager in the last 6 months, tomorrow, I want you to reach out and schedule one and talk about what your goals are. And even if you're happy where you're at, you should still be talking about you should still be setting and talking about your goals. Set boundaries. The most frequent reason I'm given by clients for being unhappy in their current situation, in their current job, is that they feel like they're being taken advantage of. Now, this is a very complicated conversation, and this isn't an overnight fix. There are millions of books out there that can really dig in, and I'm not going to have the time to really dig in fully on this. But high level, if your work is overflowing, if you feel like you're taking on other people's work and not being valued for it or appreciated for it, if you're working until all hours of all nights, then it's time to start setting some boundaries. And that starts with you. Because if you're a people pleaser, and by the way, I am, it's taken years of therapy to get to where I'm not taken advantage of constantly. You keep offering to do things for people, they're going to keep letting you. And at some point it becomes normal. They forget to tell you thank you. They forget that you're exceeding their expectations of everybody else. So, is it reasonable to ask to leave at 5 on the dot in the middle of tax season? Probably not. But is it reasonable to be working till midnight, mid-November? That's also a probably not. So learn to figure out your priorities. And again, goes back to that last slide, communicate, have conversations. So I'm going to have to leave at 7 o'clock tonight. And here's what I've identified as my 3 top priorities. Does this look right to you? Would you like to help me rearrange these? How would you like me to share the responsibility of these additional things that are due, but I'm not going to get to? Conversations, boundaries. It's a lot easier to get other people to accept your boundaries than you think. The hard part is deciding that you deserve those boundaries and putting yourself in a position to start identifying them yourself. Okay, are we good? That's a hard one, and I never quite feel like I'm conveying it well. But again, if you feel like you are in that sort of a position, then there's books out there abounding on how to create boundaries. There's a man named Henry Cloud that has a whole series of them. He's Christian, so bear that in mind. And he started on relationships, but he's got some really good professional ones as well. And if you don't mind the religious connotation underlying them, they've got very, very good advice inside them. Okay. And finally, what's your real challenge? Why are you in the position you're in in the position that you're in, and why are you actively looking? Okay. Is it because you're unhappy, bored, feel taken advantage of, boundaries? What's got you looking? What is your real challenge in your existing position? And Nancy, I think we're ready for our next poll. Oh, there you go. So again, are you bored? You feel taken advantage of? Do you feel overworked, like you can't get it done? Do you think you're in the wrong culture or the wrong environment? Or is there something else? And what the feedback I usually get on this is either culturally or feeling, oh, we've got a bunch of others. So let's see, 21% bored, okay. 41% other. Again, I would love it if you guys would be willing to share in the chat box what's making you unhappy. Culture, if you'll go back and do that wish list and really think about that, there's not often anything you can do to change the culture where you're at. That usually means it's time to make a move. But boundaries, feeling taken advantage of, those are very similar issues. And boredom, that means that you're not learning, you're not growing anymore. And so that means it's time for you to take on something else. Very limited growth potential. Okay, that's a good one, and that's a very reasonable one. So my challenge to you is to start by making sure that that's correct. Start by having conversations with your leadership. Tell them what your desired growth looks like, and ask them how they can help to get you there. And they may not be able to get you all the way there, but they may be willing to get you further than you realize. So that's definitely a challenge. Anybody else? No? Okay. So sometimes when we do everything we can, we draw our boundaries, we have our conversations, we do everything that we possibly know how to do, and it just isn't going to work. There is no growth opportunity. There is no opportunity to stay where we're at and be happy. When do you know that it's time to throw in the towel? And by the way, most really strong professionals struggle with this because they feel like leaving is failure. I'm here to tell you it is not. I said it earlier. I'll say it again. Workplaces are no longer designed to keep us long term. So on average, we're staying somewhere between 18 months for Gen Z and some of the younger millennials, all the way to about 7 years for the boomers. Okay, that's it. And that is so different than when most of us entered the workforce. So wrap your head around that and allow yourself to move if it's necessary. So if you find that you're completely off course in your career and you're not doing what you want to be doing. Now, sometimes our careers take a turn, a left turn, and we love it. My background is HR. I still love working with small businesses, but who knew? I find myself spending most of my time working with job seekers. That was an absolute left turn I never saw coming, but I'm growing and I'm learning and I'm loving it. So I'm okay with that. So I'm not saying you can't be flexible. You can't, or that you shouldn't keep your eye open to unplanned opportunities. But if you think you're off course or you feel like you're not growing, the person who said that they didn't have any growth opportunities, if you've had those conversations and you've communicated that with your leadership, it may be time to transition to a new organization. Just as importantly, if you're not being heard, if you're attempting to communicate and you're being pushed off, you're being ignored, that's an indication that you're not being valued where you're at, whether it's bad leadership, whether it's you've set bad precedents that you're not going to be able to overcome. That's also a good indicator that it might be time to start looking. And by the way, there's never any harm in looking. And looking when you're not desperate allows you better opportunity to make pickier decisions, which is always a good thing. If you're not happy or if you don't feel satisfied, it's okay to start looking. Most men won't admit to this, but most women I know will admit to having a job at some point in their career where, they cried their way to work every day. If you're doing that, ladies or men, stop, update your resume, and start looking. That's probably not fixable. Now, if it's a boundaries issue, you got to start fixing that before you go to your next job, or you're going to have the same problem. And then finally, when work and life are out of balance, you guys are in an interesting field with, certain deadlines. Obviously, you're not going to have absolute balance. And actually, no field has perfect balance, but you know what it's supposed to look like. And when you feel like your family's being neglected, or you're not being able to take care of yourself or your family or your outside obligations properly because work has taken over, then it may be time to consider a transition. And considering some of the barriers in your industry, you've got to be willing to accept that tax season. I've never known a tax accountant who's not willing to work till midnight the entire month of April. It is what it is. And usually the first quarter of the year, if I'm not mistaken. If that's no longer in the cards for you, that's okay. But it means it's time to go look for something else. You can't expect your industry or your employer to change if your life shifts. And we all have different seasons in our lives, and that's okay. That's to be expected. Young families, when they start having children, they often want to pull back a little bit. Not a lot, because you're usually still in a growth phase, But if you need to be home at night to see your kiddos, that's okay. You've got to balance that, and you've got to figure out what's the most important. Whereas young, fresh out of school, we're usually willing to put in the 20-hour days if necessary to grow that career. Then your kids get a little bit older, things even out, you're usually willing to put in a little bit more time. Now, obviously, I'm throwing out some massive stereotypes, so take this with a grain of salt, but I throw this out here because it's important to know that we go through stages. We go through different times of our life, and it's okay. Everybody does it. Everybody's transitions are a little bit different. And then we're seeing this mass exodus right now. I read an article on AARP not a month ago, and I'm sure you guys have read articles about mass resignation, about how with everything going back to normal, a lot of people are leaving their jobs. This article focused in on people of retirement age who, even a couple of years ago felt like they were going to continue working. Now we've got people taking early retirement, or people who thought they were going to continue working for an extended period of time, taking retirement. But what we also see when we see this happening are a lot of professionals going, well, I don't know that I was ready to completely retire. And so maybe I don't want to work 70-hour work weeks anymore, but maybe I want to work 30 hours a week. So what does that balance look like to you? And if you can't get it where you're at, then it's definitely time to start looking. Sometimes it's about the job, sometimes it's about the workplace or environment. So if you've decided that it's time to transition, and when I say transition in this case, I'm talking about transitioning into a new organization and or a new position. So not a lateral move, but a different move. First thing you have to do is know your goal. Again, talked about this before, the dream job wish list, but so many people just kind of throw it out there and go, I don't know. If I walk into a room of job seekers and I say, great, what do you do? What are you looking for? Maybe I can help. 9 out of 10 people will, I kid you not, tell me, I'll take anything. I'm just looking for my next opportunity. Well, if I don't know you well, I can't help you. And inevitably, when I teach this in person, I'll usually go around the table and have everybody introduce themselves and tell me what they're looking for. So the first person always gets set up because that's always the first thing out of their mouth. And I always say, well, I can't help you, next person. So know your goal. And I won't dig into this here because it's not a really strong part of this presentation. But part of that goal allows you to have an effective elevator pitch. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's a very, very important part of job hunting. And it's a very, very important part of networking during your job hunt. So the more focused you are in your elevator pitch, in your job hunt, then the quicker you land. Plain and simple. I know it sounds very counterintuitive. I've been doing this a long time. I promise it works. So what is your goal? And again, goals different for everybody. I want to go to work for a larger organization with a career, with a solid path to growth. I'm looking for this specific job. I'm looking for this specific culture, whatever that is for you. Don't let anybody else identify that for you. When you start searching, focus on what you can contribute. This is especially true when you're looking to move up and not just over. Focus on abilities. Skills. I'm really great at Excel. That's a skill. I'm really great at parsing data to come up with answers. That is an ability. Now, if I have the ability, I don't have to be good at Excel. I can learn it. Okay, is that clear to everybody? I think that's one of the most important things I can tell you. Sometimes employers are looking for skills that you don't yet have honed, that was terrible, that you have not yet honed in yourself, but you have the ability to gain that skill. Sometimes you don't. Some people are never going to be great at customer service because they're not good with other people. Some people are never going to be good in the accounting field because they're not good with data. They're not good at analytical thinking. Okay, doesn't make them wrong, doesn't make them bad, but abilities are far more important than skills. And employers are starting to figure that out, and they're starting to do a much better job of searching people based on abilities instead of skills. So focus on what you can contribute, okay? The other thing I'm going to throw in here is think about what your differentiator is. What are you known for? I can line up 15 accountants and you guys all have the same basic skill set, but you all have that one thing. What are you the go-to person for? What do you have the reputation for? What makes you stand out in your field? Okay, a lot of us already know what that is. If you don't, that's okay. Start asking. Again, go back to your leaders, go back to your teammates and ask them, hey, what do you think my greatest contribution is here? What are you known for? What is your differentiator? What makes you unique in the workforce? Utilize that in your resume, utilize that in your cover letter, utilize that in your elevator pitch, in your interview process, and it will help you to find the right fit, because somebody's going to be looking for that. Somebody's going to be looking for somebody who has a special ability in whatever your differentiator is. Okay, you guys are a quiet bunch. We're getting through this fast. If you have questions, please feel free to jump in. Understand the why. Okay, again, I know this probably feels like I am repeating myself to a degree, and I am, but that's because this is such an important thing. Why do you want to make a change? Okay, you have to be able to communicate that as you're looking to land effectively. And this is also a really great opportunity to craft those questions. You know, you get to the end of an interview and the interviewer says, so what questions do you have for me? And we all blank because we can't ask about pay. We can't ask about, you know, the typical stuff, benefits, hours, who'd be my boss, where would I sit, right? We can't ask those questions. And so everybody says, well, what am I supposed to ask? This right here. Once you have defined what success means to you, then you know what questions to ask. And this is a little bit outside of your field, but my favorite example of this, because it's so easy to understand. If you're going to apply for a position in a call center and you define success by making sure that every single customer gets off the phone thrilled with you, but the call center defines success by calls of no more than 2 minutes apiece, are you going to be successful in that position? You're not. Now, can you overcome that? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you can go, well, okay, I can make that happen. Or maybe you're going to say, I would be miserable trying to rush people off the phone because I'm an empath and it's in my nature to stay until they're done. And so I know I wouldn't be successful here. Well, guess what? Either way, you've got to win, because now you know what the expectations are. And now you know that you can meet them or not, and that you can keep looking. So that why is very, very important. How do you define success? So you want to answer that question broadly, but you also want to answer that question very specifically. How do I know that I am successful in my job search? Or how do I know I've gotten a successful job offer? It's when you have one that meets those needs for you. Okay. And again, my success might not be your success, and that's okay. We're not the same people. We're not looking for the same job. Okay. If you're moving into something different, this is not a lateral move. This is a move into something that you have not done before. Start by gathering as much information as possible. Google, go online. What are the primary organizations that hire? That might not be where you want to go, but it's a great place to learn about the field, the position, the industry. A perfect example, I don't know if I've got any oil and gas people on here, but we've had an influx of people from out of state, and I'll get them coming in and saying, hey, I know the oil and gas industry is really popular here. I think I want in that. And I always have to say, well, are you sure? What do you know about the industry? Because I know it goes like this, up and down and up and down. And depending on the field that you're in inside the industry, you might not be happy, or you might not have a job in 2 years, because I happen to work with a lot of people on a very cyclical basis in that industry. Now, there are lots of industries that do that sort of thing. So what do you know about this industry that you think you want to move into? What do you know about the position in general? What does the market look like today? Am I going to be able to find a job? Am I going to be able to find a job that pays me what I need to be making? Not just what I think I'm worth, but what I need to be making. Am I going to have to take a step back, and can I do that? And we'll touch on that here in a minute. Do some informational interviews. Okay, now let's talk about what an actual informational interview looks like. This is not a subversive way to get somebody to offer you a job. An informational interview is exactly what it looks like, and anybody who's done this for any length of time will see through any other attempt. So the information, to prepare for an informational interview, you write out 3 to 5 questions. Tell me how this works in this industry or this position. Can you tell me more about that? How did you get here? What's the educational path, the career path, the fill in the blank to do what you do? What's the average pay increase look like over the course of your career? Whatever's most important to you, you write down those questions, and then you identify a handful of professionals in the profession. If you know them, so much the better. If you don't, LinkedIn is a really great place to find connections. But then you very respectfully, you keep it short, 15 minutes, buy them a cup of coffee. We can even do that online. You send them a Starbucks card and you do a 15-minute Zoom if you're not ready to get back in person. But you also be very, very appreciative of their time. Again, you do not target the person who you think is hiring the job you think you want. Please don't do that. That is the quickest way to get knocked out of consideration, is if you try to trick your way into an interview. An informational interview is strictly learning how this position works. Whatever those gaps in knowledge you have are meant to get answered. How would you go about downscaling from, say, a CFO role to a public company to a smaller nonprofit? Networking. A lot of people are going to look at your, and those informational interviews can be very, very helpful to find out what they're looking for specifically, so you can highlight those. A lot of people will look at your resume or your LinkedIn profile and be concerned that you really know what you're getting into. The pay is going to go down, the hours are going to change. There's going to be some significant differences, but you would be an excellent candidate for informational interviews, so you can really learn the specifics of what they're looking for. And then you highlight those items in you. Once you can answer to their concerns, and their ideals, well, then you start having the conversations with the right people. And networking is going to get you in front of those people in a way that your resume won't, because your resume is not saying. You can change the story on your resume to a large degree, but there's always going to, when you're making a change like that, there's always going to be that gap. And so interviewing is going to be your best. I'm sorry, networking is going to be your best bet. Does that help? All right. Any others? Okay. And please.
I'm going to jump in if I might, Crystal. This is Bob.
Yes, please.
One of the things that you mentioned about the individual looking for the position, I think one of the best questions you can ask when you're in an interview is exactly what she suggested that you ask of yourself. In other words, you can say very easily to them, how do you measure success in this position?
100%.
And if you ask them that question, I think you'll get a lot of great information. And people are always looking for questions, to ask them. And I think that's a great one. So
now yes, no, I agree 100%. And I didn't dig into that. And we certainly can into other things that you should be asking. But yeah, there are actually two questions in particular that I don't care if you are fresh out of college or about ready to retire, you should always ask. How do you measure success is one of them. How do I know when I'm successful in this position? And the other one is a little bit simpler, but it's, why is this position open? And you're not going to get a good response most of the time. Sometimes it's going to be something very benign, like, we just lost our last controller to maternity leave and she decided not to come back, or we promoted, or, whatever. So sometimes it's going to tell you that they promote from within. Sometimes it's going to tell you they have ridiculous turnover, which means you need to dig a little bit deeper. Sometimes you're not going to learn anything at all, but that's okay, because it's worth it when you do learn something. But that's a good one to ask, just because you can get a lot of background information from that simple question. And then of course there's there's dozens of other really good questions that you can ask as well. But those again depend on you and on what your priorities are. So I'm going to stop for a second. Questions, feedback. You want me to dig a little bit deeper into that? Okay. I've hit this all really high level with the expectation of more questions. So again, please jump in. We're getting real close to the end and we've got some time. Another great, and you can get some of this from the informational interview, you can get some of this from Googling online, but what's a typical day in this new position? You want to make sure that you're very clear. I'm a people person. I've actually done, and please, I feel kind of goofy saying it to this group of people. I've done bookkeeping in many of my positions in my career. I wouldn't consider myself up to you guys, but I would never make a good accountant because I like to talk too much. I like to be in front of other people. I like to be around people. I like to be interactive. And, on my bookkeeping days, I would always have to lock myself in my office and focus. Now, some of you guys may be better at doing that without the focus than I am, but I was a bookkeeper by necessity, not because I was really fantastic at it. So what's a typical day like, right? Is it something I'm going to be able to do day in, day out? Am I going to be happy with it? I know what I think it looks like, but is it really? Let's go back to that call center example that I used earlier. Hey, I love people. I love talking on the phone. I think I'd be great at a call center, but I'm not a good problem solver. And this particular position requires that I solve people's problems all day, and I deal with angry people. And so you have to be very aware of what you're getting into, especially if you're making a big change. All right. touched on this, gonna dig a little bit deeper. This is probably the last group I really have to dig into, but it's such an important piece. Are you financially prepared? Are you financially prepared to be out of work for 9 months? In DFW in 2019, before the pandemic, it took on average 9 months to find a new job. 9 months. Most people coming to me after about 6 weeks going, I'm dying. I don't know how I'm going to pay my mortgage next month. So do you have enough money in the bank to transition you? Try not to leave your current position until you have a new one, because 9 months is the average. Now, I always back that up with, please prove me wrong. I would love to see you land in 6 weeks. And yes, it does happen sometimes. It happens quicker than that sometimes. But you have to understand what the average is. And I've seen it expand even more. Now, I think we're starting to see that timeline pull back in a little bit. But when I talk to job seekers, I still talk about the 9 months because it's the best data I have. I don't think we can throw pandemic data out there as accurate, long term. So make sure that you're in a position not to jump on the first thing that comes your way. Start looking early, because the earlier you start looking, if I start looking now and I'm actually comfortable in my job as it is, then I'm going to be comfortable saying no to the wrong positions. Whereas if I'm out of work for 4 months, even if I am okay financially, if I'm digging through my savings, I'm more likely to jump on the wrong thing. Are we seeing a pattern of for-profit CFOs moving to nonprofits? No, not really. I'm going to tell you that not-for-profit is its own little world. It's got completely different norms. It's got different pay scales. I'm going to tell you the one thing, I don't care what you're doing, CFO or otherwise, if you're moving into a nonprofit, unless you're looking at one of the really, really big ones, you're looking at taking a massive pay cut. So no, I'm not. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying it's not doable at all, but it's not something I've seen. Bob, do you have anything to respond to that?
No, other than the fact that, if money is not your primary concern and you want to be happy and really happy on your job, sometimes those nonprofits are really a great place to be.
Agreed. They can also be a lot more challenging than a lot of people realize, because you're dealing with social issues usually, and it can be really painful to see that day in and day out. So make sure you're prepared for that. But by all means, some people just have a heart for that. And if you're in a position where you can do that, please do. All right, before we jump on to the next slide, we're going to do our second to last poll. Nancy, have you ever quit a job without another one lined up? Yes, and I regret it. Yes, and I would do it again. Or no, I've never done that. Now, personally, I fall in the yes, and I regret it, and the yes, I would do it again. Sometimes it's just the right move at the right time. And I'm going to tell you, if you are struggling with, yes, and I shouldn't have done it, but I would totally do it again if I found myself in that position again, that means that you weren't properly career planning. And that's how I found myself in that position, is I didn't properly career plan. And then, man, I am going to make this work. I am not a failure. It's a common mindset, and it's terrible. The second, all these things we've been talking about, the second you start recognizing that this isn't where you need to be, you've got to start looking, so you don't get to that point where one day you get up from your desk and walk out. So only 7% say yes and they regret it, and 37% say yes and they would do it again. Well, good for you guys. The one thing I do find about my financial people are you guys do plan a little bit better, and so you're usually a little bit better prepared financially to be out of work. So good for you for that, by the way. That's a lesson I didn't learn until much later in life than I should have. So, and again, I started to touch on this, but I'll address it specifically. Make sure if you're transitioning to something new, like that from for-profit into a nonprofit position, make sure that you're aware of what those financial changes are going to look like, and make sure that it's okay. Sometimes it is. I know, we hit a certain stage in our life where our kids have moved out, we've paid off our house, we don't have to make as much money as we did. And sometimes that's exactly the right time to take a step back. I love to pick on my assistant, Dee Dee. She is the best thing that ever happened to me. She is a retired executive out of a transportation firm. She retired, decided she hated it, and came to work for me. And she tells me all the time, you've got me for 30 hours a week. That's it. Don't ask me for more. I'm not going to give it to you. But it works out well for both of us. I get a lot of really high level expertise for her. She's got an easier job that she doesn't have to take home. And quite frankly, she gets to set her hours. She's that valuable. So, those things do exist as well. But she had to be financially ready to take that step back, because she doesn't make what she did when she worked for a big corporation. Okay. Are you over previous hurts and toxicity? This is a big one. And this goes back to the same conversation about drawing barriers. If we haven't set boundaries and we go to a new job, those same boundaries are going to be crossed. If we're hurt, angry, feel taken advantage of, we can often take that into the new job with us. If you've ever quit a job without a new job lined up, there's probably some hurt and toxicity there. So if you're in that position or feeling like you might be close to that position, take some time to deal with that. I'm not going to tell you how, but take some time to deal with that. You'll be in a much better position. I liken this to dating, right? You ever that rebound relationship that was worse than the one you started in? Don't do that to yourself, especially not in a job. So if you're in a toxic, hurt, upset headspace, you're also going to be taking that mindset and that attitude to interviews with you. And I'm going to tell you, a good interviewer, they're going to see that. They're not going to know what's creating that, but they're going to see something surrounding you that says, be careful of this person. And that could affect your ability to get another job too. Oh, this is a good one. Many people leave a job because of a bad boss. How do you answer the question on why you are leaving without actually lying about it? Okay, fantastic question. Don't ever lie about it. But you're right. You have to be very careful about saying, my boss stunk, because then they're thinking that it's probably you. So you want to get real clear on why they're a bad boss in your head. And so you can talk to specifics. Now, sometimes, hey, I got a new boss a few months ago, and we have different cultural norms, or we have different ideas on the best way to handle things, and we couldn't come to terms, and I decided it was time to move on. So that's a question much easier to answer specifically, situation by situation. So I apologize, I'm not going to give you a really good broad answer, but focus on the details of the specifics of why they weren't a good boss, and then talk about the positive outcome of moving past that. So you never say they're a bad boss, you never say they stunk, even though you go out and have beers with your friends and talk about that. But I left a job where we had different ideas on what was morally acceptable with some of the employees. And, we had a cultural shift in the organization. It was no longer a good fit for me, and I decided it was time to move on. Now, I just told you the absolute truth. What I didn't tell you was the boss asked me to break the law. He was a jerk and he fired me. Okay. You see the difference? I just told you the same story. True story, by the way, just told you the same story in two different ways. One sounded very positive. The other one, although truthful, is going to make the interviewer go, huh, she got fired. What's the rest of the story, right? And that's not a story you want to dig into. That happened 10 years ago, and if you get me going on it, I can still sound bitter and angry about it. And that doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit me. It doesn't benefit the interviewer. It's long gone. It's past. Now, I might also follow that up with, you know, I wish I had seen it sooner, and I will never put myself in that position again. So one of the things I'm looking for is fill in the blank. So honesty, and keep it as high level as possible. So while we're on that conversation, when answering any interview question, but especially difficult ones, you answer exactly what was asked, nothing extra, and you stop talking. That's hard for most people to do. Exactly what was asked, stop talking. If they want more detail, they'll dig. But people have a tendency, especially with emotional things like that, and bad bosses, we're all, whether you think you're emotional about it or not, you probably are. And we have a tendency to vomit out way too much information. So, other questions? Guys, we came to the end of it. We got here quick. I've got lots of time rolled in here to answer questions for you guys. So what else do we have for you? To what extent do employers require industry experience, particularly for senior management hires? That's a very hard question to answer because it depends on the employer. My advice to you specifically is make sure that your resume doesn't focus too much on one industry. Obviously, if you're in well-known organizations, it's going to be hard to mask, but don't be careful of using too much industry jargon. Don't talk industry specific anywhere in your bullets. Just talk fields, talk job specifics. And there's organizations out there who are going to be looking for your experience, your expertise, as opposed to your industry background. So it's a little bit harder, but it's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. Probably a good 40% of the people that I work with in my day-to-day are transitioning either into a new industry or job completely. And we've been very, very successful. So as long as you believe that you can do it, you can do it. Did that answer your question? I know I kind of went a different direction, but was that what you were asking, Cameron? All right, what else? Any other questions for me?
You're right, Crystal. This is a very shy group. Either that or you really covered the topic well. I do want to comment that, yeah, a lot of these people on this call have been on previous calls, and I find it interesting that you mentioned the 30-second elevator speech. If there isn't a person on this call that doesn't have that, it would shock me, because we've only had like 5 or 6 webinars about how to put your message in a short, tiny little sentence.
Good, good. And it's exactly the same when you're transitioning, except you focus on you more than your organization. So I do have a couple other questions here. To what extent of a disadvantage do you have when relocating cities? Again, that's about messaging. It's about how you present yourself. Get your city off your resume and put the new city on your LinkedIn profile if you know exactly where you're going. It can be a disadvantage, but it doesn't have to be a showstopper. And that's actually getting easier all the time. Organizations are getting smarter about hiring, transitional people, because it doesn't matter, especially if what you're doing doesn't require you to be, right there. So again, don't tell them where you're at until you're forced to. Don't lie, but you don't have to offer up that information. And that makes it a little bit easier to at least get to that conversation stage. Let's see, somebody says positive answers suggest emotional recovery from difficult or compromised situations. Prospective employers don't want a basket case, and neither would I if I was hiring. That's exactly right. I'm going to read that again because I think that's really powerful. Positive answers suggest emotional recovery from difficult or compromised situations. We've all been in bad work environments. The question is, have you overcome it, or are you still wallowing in it? Are you still in that blaming stage? Are you still in that it's their fault stage? And guess what? Even if it is their fault, even if you know without a shadow of a doubt that you did everything you could have, you've got to own your piece of it. You know, I hung in there too long. And I regret having done that. I really should have started looking long before. You know, it wasn't beneficial. It wasn't any more beneficial to the organization than it was for me to stick around. And, you know, he did the right thing by firing me, or whatever the case may be. Again, be sincere. Sometimes you have to practice that positive approach until you fully believe it. Because sometimes even in the back of your head going, yeah, that jerk, he doesn't deserve me, right? But that's actually the case with any and all interview questions. People don't prepare for interviews. And then they show up and the interviewer says, hey, nice to meet you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And our minds go blank. Okay. We know that almost every interview we go into, we get asked, just tell me about yourself. So how many people on here are prepared to answer that question right here, right now? And there's not a poll for that, so they're not going to make you answer that. But if you're not, then you should be prepared right now. You should know how you're going to answer all the basic common interview questions. And even you higher level people, you know, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? You know, have some behavioral situations ready. Is somebody going to ask a CFO, so what do you think your greatest weaknesses are? No, but they are going to ask you about challenges. They're going to ask you about opportunities. And so it's the same question, it's just being asked at a different level. So be prepared, have those answers ready before you go. Don't memorize them. You don't have to have them memorized word for word. But if you know the basics before you go, then when you get hit up with that really weird question that nobody saw coming, you won't be so twisted over, tell me about yourself, that you can't form a full sentence and talk about that. You can put your emotional and nervous energy into answering the ones you weren't prepared for. So I'm going to take a step back. I think this is a great opportunity to tell me about yourself. There is no right answer. I bet I have a bunch of hiring managers on here, and I bet they're all looking for something slightly different when they ask, tell me about yourself. So best answer I ever found, I actually took this from a volunteer group I used to work with, and they called it the 2-minute resume. And it was a little bit of pre-work, education, previous work, very, very high level. You're going to give a transitional you're going to talk about your current or last job, give a transitional statement. And that brings me here. And I'm very excited about this position because it should be 2 minutes max. It should really be a minute to a minute and a half. And you can have that whole thing memorized just like your elevator pitch, except for that transitional piece, which is going to change based on the organization that you're interviewing with. So I'm going to go over that one more time because I think that's important. And I highly encourage you guys to figure that out because that will work in other situations besides interviews. A little bit of previous work, education, pre-work, education, previous work, current or last position, transitional statement about why you're looking, and I'm here because. And obviously you're not going to have the here because piece of it yet. All right, and I'm going to throw out the opportunity for one more question, and then I'll have Nancy throw up the last poll for us.
Yes, feel free to type in any questions in the Q&A or in the chat. And while we're waiting for those last formalized questions, I'll launch that poll.
Perfect. Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, everybody gets their CPP.
And let me
During this
remind
period-
you, there is an anonymous, there is a way to ask these questions anonymously. If that's what's got you guys quiet, I promise somebody else is wanting to ask the same question that you're not wanting to ask. But I'll also throw out there, I put my email address in here because there's inevitably that one question that you just can't ask publicly. And I welcome you to shoot me an email. I'm happy to follow up.
And I want to remind you all to stay on after the presentation for some housekeeping stuff that we need to do, okay?
Excellent. All right, I'm going to end that poll. Thanks. I don't need to share those results. Actually, I should probably share those results because it will tell us all that Crystal did a great job.
Awesome. Thank you. So despite the fact that nobody wants to ask any questions, I hope that means you guys got lots of good information. Oh, what do you
That
mean?
means you covered it well, yes.
What do you mean by pre-work? What I mean by pre-work is usually I'll encourage you to talk about what led you into your field, or this is a great place to talk about something personal, not too personal, not I'm a single mom with 6 kids at home, you know, type of personal. But one of the things I like to throw out there, I was born in Wisconsin. And so I like to say, you know, I was born up north, but I got to Texas as quick as I could. I consider myself a transplant Texan. I've been here most of my life. It brings a little levity to the conversation, and it gives you a little something personal. So pre-work is, you know, since, you know, I've known I wanted to be a CFO since I was 3. It's, you know, I really wanted to be an astronaut, but I went to school and found out I was really good with numbers. Whatever your story is, that's a hard one to give even a general answer to, but it's something that's not work related about you that the employer might want to know. Doesn't have to be important. Anybody else?
Okay, thank you, Crystal. I'm gonna bring back Bob, and Bob, you've got announcements and gobs of information for these folks.
All right, and I'm gonna jump off. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you, Crystal. Couple of things. Many of you during the course of this have received a message from me. Right now, my difficulty is I got more jobs than I got people. Now, you may have seen in the last couple of weeks, somewhere between 5 and 10 opportunities that went out to the Google group. If you're not in the Google group and you're not seeing that stuff, you're really missing out a lot of stuff. However, I've got probably about 6 opportunities that I can't send out right now that I'm using the synopsis to try to source candidates for. And if you're not on synopsis, then you're not in a position where you're being considered for those opportunities. So right now, if you're looking for a job, please be on the synopsis and please be on the Google groups. And if you're not, send me an email saying, I want to join in that stuff. Because if you're not getting jobs from Google groups, you're missing out. And if you're not on synopsis, you're in a position basically where I'm not considering you. Now, a lot of things from a housekeeping perspective have changed. We are going to go back to in-person meetings in August. August is not actually going to be a meeting. Traditionally, we have a happy hour in August, and so we are going to continue that tradition. We're going to have a happy hour in August. However, we have a whole new place to go to, and we have a whole new sponsor. Bank of Texas is sponsoring the meetings from now on, probably. We're changing the time and the date from the 4th Tuesday to the 3rd Tuesday. We're going back to the 6 o'clock time instead of the 3 o'clock time. So the next meeting will actually be the happy hour. It exists in, I think it's 5956 Sherry Lane, but which most people really remember, it's the Park Cities Club building on the ground floor. There's a beautiful facility there that Bank of Texas has had for us, where there will be stuff that, munchies. There will be beer and wine and, soft drinks and stuff like that for happy hour. As you know, the alumni come back, some of the FBI folks come back, and this is a great time to network with people. I encourage you all to make it on the 4th Tuesday of August to the Bank of Texas sponsored perspective that we're having there. So again, new time and date. The 3rd Tuesday will start in September, and the time will be, what we set up with them is the time will be 5:30 just to come in and do some networking and actually begin the presentations and et cetera at 6 o'clock. So remember about the happy hour in August, because that's typically one of the best attended, and it has a lot of the alumni and et cetera that come to that. So I will again suggest to you all that you sign up for the Google group and or you give me your synopsis, because right now I can't fill some of these positions because I just don't have the candidates that have the qualifications for it. And if I'm overlooking you, then I would prefer not to. So please send me all that good stuff. And again, thank you all very much for attending.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. This brings us to the bottom of the hour, and we do appreciate your attendance. Again, CPE credits will be available in 7 to 10 business days, and you will receive the email notification in your inbox regarding that. Thank you very much. We wish you the best of the evening.